Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined, as always, his triumphant return. You missed him, I missed him. My co-host, Justin Goodrum, in the house. Justin, how you doing, man?
Doing well. It's been a minute, man. Thanks for holding down the fort. I was away,
Of
on
course.
business, and then unfortunately, I got sick. So it's been a minute since I've been back in the lab. But I appreciate you holding it down.
Of course, of course. I'm glad you are feeling better and back on the mend and back in the show. Um, let's go ahead and get right into it, Justin. We've got a lot of topics to cover tonight, and I want to jump right in with what finished over the weekend, which of course is the in-season tournament. It's the first ever NBA in-season tournament championship game. And if you've been listening to the show, you've been hearing us talk about this. So it's no surprise. It wound up with the Lakers versus the Pacers in this title game. 6 games in total to get here. 2 of these neutral games at the end, the semifinals and then the finals, which are neutral games, neutral site, don't count to running statistics. So it's not like an 84 game season, even with those 2 extra games. The stats and everything, they don't officially exist, but they did count towards the in-season tournament totals. And we see the numbers here that there were 4,580,000 viewers on ABC and ESPN2. Is what the game averaged, and that's the most watched non-Christmas NBA game during the regular season in nearly 6 years. So, Justin, first, before we bring all the other narratives and nonsense, you could say, into the equation, I want to get your thoughts on the in-season tournament now that the whole thing is over. Do you feel, or how do you feel about it as a whole?
Yeah, you sent over Ethan Strauss's Substack about the tournament, and he was very negative on it. And just kind of skimming it over, I just to answer that, just based on what we have on our rundown here. I don't know. I don't know what the criticism is. This is not a surprise. Like these media entities, they have a business interest in this tournament succeeding. So ESPN, TNT, like that's their coverage. So they want viewers. Of course, they're gonna hype it up as much as possible, especially since it's on their networks. To answer your question, I think this was a success. I mean, you brought it up. The most watched non-Christmas Day regular season game of 6 years. That's a success. I think looking at the tournament, a few observations. One, I think, a lot of just kind of the minor things will be improved, like the courts. Adam Silver, I believe, was on Pat McAfee's show saying that will be improved. Um, I think a lot of just the continuity of the tournament that will be improved as well in terms of promotion. Like to me, it was kind of hard to keep track of like when the games were coming on. A little bit confusing in terms of like non-tournament games, tournament games. Like it's just a little bit confusing. So I think all that will be straightened out. I mean, it's a new concept. It's probably gonna take 5 years for it to really take hold, but I think based in Vegas, I think it was a huge success for the game. I mean, normally we're not talking about the regular season in this serious much of detail. I mean, you take a look at the Indiana Pacers, you know how seriously they took that on their home court. I mean, they were going nuts. I mean, now it's fantastic. So to me, I would say this was a success. I think there's a lot of, kinks to work out. I'm not, necessarily surprised about that. I think certainly another criticism is just the tournament in Vegas. I think the first semifinal game beginning so early,
Yeah.
I think that's something they'll need to work out. These are all logistical things that's just going to take time. So that being said, I think this was a success. Got a lot of people talking about it. There were so many podcasts I was listening to. They were referencing a lot of non-basketball fans. They would see the court and be like, "Huh, what's that?" And they would get their interest. I mean, that's huge. I mean, that for basketball fans, it's like, "What's the big deal? Who cares?" But what the NBA wants is non-basketball fans to be attracted to the game. That's the name of the game, is casual fans. And I think they pulled that off based on the finals rating there. Disappointing that the game wasn't super close. That was a bummer. I was kind of looking forward to it. I think the first half was pretty competitive. And then I think like the second and the third and fourth quarter between the Pacers and Lakers, kind of, the Lakers pulled away there. So overall, I think it was a huge success. I think there's just a lot of kind of kinks to work out. I don't know if you saw the broadcast or not between ESPN and TNT. They did like a crossover
Just a
broadcast
little
there.
bit, but
I
yeah,
think that
yeah, we
was.
talked about it.
I mean, I'm going to say TNT had the better coverage. I mean, with just
Of
Wilbon and
course.
Stephen A. going on their show. ESPN felt weird just having them spread apart. So honestly, I just think TNT should just take the tournament, especially because they don't get the finals. So I know there's a lot of different rights deals going up and everything, but if everything stays the same, I think just TNT should just take this tournament, since the most likely the finals is going to be on probably a broadcast network. But apologies for the diatribe, but overall, I think it was a huge success with just some things to work out in the future.
Now, let me digress while we're here, and we'll come back to the in-season tournament. I do want to mention a bit of good, happy, exciting news. I think everyone in the NBA community and the NBA broadcasting community is excited for Ernie Johnson, who's going to be officially inducted into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame tonight. So just want to give a shout out and congrats to him, since you mentioned that excellent Turner broadcast. I mean, it's basically the GOAT of basketball broadcasting, and Ernie is a huge part of why that's been so successful. So congratulations to him.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Getting back to the in-season tournament, and again, I bring up that Ethan Strauss article because it's sort of a counterpoint, maybe an intentional zag on his part, but maybe um, just the other side that we're not hearing. The coverage that we hear on ESPN, on Turner, just about anywhere else. I mean, you and I as podcasters, we're excited to have this sort of extra intrigue with the in-season tournament to talk about. And I mostly agree with you that I do think it was a successful experiment. I guess the point that Ethan Strauss is making is that he actually feels that it didn't pull in the casual fan, based on the ratings that it got, where the semifinals didn't add up to quite what the finals had. I don't think he wrote this after the finals. I think it was before that. So I guess his criticism is that the semifinal games don't really look, you see the ratings there, Pacers
Yeah.
Bucks 1.6
Hmm.
million, Pelicans Lakers 2.174 million, and they don't really equate to all that much better than a standard regular season game, which in his opinion is not indicative that this pulled in a whole lot of casual fans. I do think it is encouraging to see the highest ratings of a regular season game in 6 years, as we pulled up the stats earlier. And you and I have talked ad nauseum about how it really is tough to I mean, it sounds like a cop out, but it is truly difficult to judge ratings and with social media and all the other mediums that are out there, and like YouTube views, how do you factor that into the equation, even if it's being consumed after the fact? So I think there are some fair concerns with it. I think there are some things about presentation, maybe, but like you said, I don't want to belabor your point because I agree with it. I do think it's, in 5 years, this may look much different than it looked here. One of the outcomes for this, Justin, and we'll get to a lot of questions kind of about the implications of the in-season tournament, but one of the outcomes here that we heard from Chris Haynes is that a championship banner, an in-season tournament championship banner, will be raised in LA inside Crypto Arena, which is their new arena, of course. And a lot of people referencing back to Jeannie Buss saying that she used a conference championship trophy as a door stopper because it just doesn't mean much to that franchise. Clips about Kobe going around and that they only hang banners for titles with this franchise. And now you have this in-season tournament championship, which is fairly inconsequential, a nice 500K bonus for those players, of course, but doesn't give, extra playoff seating even at this point. We'll talk about that in a minute. Doesn't give, anything other than that financial incentive at this point. And it essentially boiled down to you won 6 games over the course of the regular season. So how do you feel about just raising this banner and how people are taking these narratives? You see extremes in either way. How do you feel about this overall, Justin?
Well, look at the Lakers and the privilege on them, huh? Like, sheesh. And
Right.
I mean, I'm wondering,
17 titles. They're saying, some people saying 18 now with this in-season tournament.
do they hang division championship banners?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so for the Lakers. I
Okay.
think some franchises might. You might consider them quote unquote poverty franchises compared to what the Lakers have achieved, but we're talking obviously
Sure.
one of the greatest, if not the greatest basketball franchise.
I think banners are cool. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, look at college; they raise all kinds of banners. I mean, now we're coming from a perspective. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Just take a look at UNM, right? You see the conference banners. You see the NCAA appearances. I mean, would Duke put all their banners up there for winning their conference? Probably not. So I don't know. I think it's cool. I think they should raise the banner. I think it's good publicity for the league. So I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it comes from like a total privilege point of view. Like, if that story is true about Jeannie Buss, I mean, disrespect to the league. I mean, have some respect to the league. Just put it in just send it to the Hall of Fame if you don't want the trophy in Los Angeles. Just send it to the Basketball Hall of Fame or something, or, auction it off for charity, something. Like, to me, like, using it as a doorstopper, I think disrespects the game and disrespects like the accomplishment of what that represents. I mean, I understand with the Lakers, like, the end game is winning a title, but like there's other factors to the NBA as well. And just to I guess it's one thing if you don't want a banner raise, so be it. But with the trophy thing, I think that's pretty disgraceful. So I just hope they don't treat the banner like that in terms of just like, oh, we're just gonna, use it as a rug and people will just step on it when walking into Crypto Arena. I mean, I
Well,
just have
no,
a little bit more respect than that. So.
yeah, well, and for the record, from what I've read and seen, and you guys, of course, hoopsologypod@gmail.com, or get at us in the comments if I'm wrong here, but it was also kind of mandated by Adam Silver in the NBA front office that teams are going to put up banners for this in-season tournament championship. It feels a little bit better to me that it's just going to be one banner and then they're going to mark off like years that they won the in-season tournament. So it's not taking up a ton of space. It's just one banner. So I think that's one thing. I get this whole idea of like, we have very high standards here. A division title doesn't mean much to us. I understand that mentality and I appreciate that mentality. And, I don't know about the doorstop thing, but I appreciate that mentality. But I think this is something that eventually, in 30 plus years or so, all the teams would potentially have a banner. What did you think of the celebration? They get like this NBA cup. LeBron does kind of a gesture with the cup. They have goggles and champagne going down for the celebration. Is it a little bit too much for you? Does it feel about right? Or is it going to be, kind of one of those things that's just kind of standard operating procedures down the road or otherwise?
Well, I think the issue is like, what do we want as fans to react? If they're like, "Hey, we hate this. We don't want the champagne. We're going home." What would be the headlines the next day? Being like, they don't take the tournament seriously and they think this is a waste of time. So to me, it's just like, what, you want them to celebrate too much or celebrate not at all? Like, I don't understand. Like,
Yeah,
I think
it's
to get
true.
this tournament a shot. I think they're taking it serious. They won the title. I mean, they won this, in season tournament. They're taking it serious. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, I don't understand. I don't
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
this. I think it's ridiculous just to criticize them for trying hard and accomplishing something, especially for a team that is elitist. Like, LeBron seemed like he gave it 100% out there. Like, I don't know. To me, it
Talked to the
seems,
rookies about winning them money, said, "Don't
yeah,
worry about it." Yeah. No, I'm
like,
with you. It's kinda like damned if they do, damned if they don't, right? Because if
yeah,
they're acting too cool for school, then NBA front office is gonna be pissed, and if they're, acting into it, there are people out there who are going to criticize LeBron no matter what. Look, if you look at the road that they took, just with how the schedule was drawn for them, it's also not like a very difficult road the Lakers had to win this. But either way, they end up in the finals and they win the games ahead of them that were on their schedule. So I don't fault them for that.
yeah. No, totally agree.
And looking at just kind of one more thing to come out of this, and then I want to talk about some other implications from this too real quickly. We had a lot of NBA media, Chris Broussard, who I typically respect, Chandler Parsons, who seems like he is maybe hired by Clutch Sports, I don't know, um, coming out and saying this narrative that this is another notch on the belt for LeBron catching Jordan on the GOAT resume. We talked about this a little bit last week, but to add to that, we also had LeBron posting on his Instagram. I don't know if you heard about this, some
Mhm.
rap lyrics that were basically saying that he just needs one more ring to catch Jordan at this point. A couple minutes later, I want to say within 10 minutes, this was deleted from his Instagram.
Good
And,
choice.
and I think that tells you a lot right there. But Justin, what do you make of this very, very pro aggressive LeBron narrative? And we've seen it, we've talked about it on the show this season before, this whole like LeBron versus Jordan as the GOAT, and has LeBron passed other greats before Jordan? Why is everything so obsessively about LeBron versus Jordan? But I want to focus on what does this do in terms of accolades, in terms of like stacking things? Is it another notch on the belt of an NBA career?
Yeah, it's a notch on that belt in an NBA career, but I mean, compared him to Jordan, it's it's one of those things. Like for instance, like you have the extreme of like Skip Bayless, who hates LeBron James, and then you have others that are pure, Michael Jordan loyalists that will never see LeBron in the same light as Jordan. And then you have people and usually, I think a lot of the younger fans who only watch LeBron and grew up with him, and rightfully so, they have no context of Jordan because they weren't born then. They think, LeBron's the GOAT. In terms of this tournament, I don't think it should be factored in. It's a nice accomplishment, but Jordan didn't have an in-season tournament. I mean, what are
Right.
we what are we talking about? So to me,
Right.
and for him to post that lyric, I have to think that was kind of like a troll job. I mean, does he really think
Could
that's
be.
like another ring? I can't. He's a LeBron's a historian of the game. I would say I'll hold my thoughts until like he's retired, and then we can get like a full interview of him being like, "Oh, that's another ring" or something. Like if he really thinks that's like another legitimate championship ring, then let the hatred begin. But until then, I'm gonna maybe I don't know. He's just felt good that night and wanted to just act silly. I don't know. So I'll cut him some slack regarding that until I hear otherwise. Because to me, it sounds it's ridiculous to compare that title to the NBA Finals championship.
Right. Right. We're talking 6 games here,
Yeah,
and regular season
yeah,
games at that. Yeah, with you there, and to the people saying that this is a notch on the belt of LeBron versus Jordan. I mean, as you said, obviously, anyone who has been around for 5+ years knows that Jordan didn't have the in-season tournament. And do you honestly believe Jordan wouldn't have won a couple of these in-season tournaments at least if it was around? I mean, that's the backdrop of all this, and why I think the GOAT conversation and pushing it, like driving it this way, why I think that is so ridiculous is the backdrop of the in-season tournament. And the league office has been upfront about this, is we need to get a way to get these guys to play more intensely during the regular season. And I'm sorry, but you and I were there in the 90s. We watched the games. There were marquee games in the regular season back then. I don't care if I sound like an old head. It's true. I mean, these guys played hard. And not to say that players don't play hard now, but it's not to the same level. And that was the whole reason for this in-season tournament coming about.
Yeah. No, agreed. And there's some other points too. I think going back to, that point with the players, take a look at the 90s. I mean, the money was way less back then. And now, from a player perspective, there's a lot more stakes in terms of, hey, I don't want to get hurt. What's the meaning of a
Right.
regular season game? Now you put some stakes to it in this in-season tournament. There's Vegas. I think what was it? The Pelicans. I think what was it? Zion or somebody. They were just joking beforehand how fun of a time they had in Vegas. I mean, that's an appeal. Go to regular season, go to Vegas, and play in this tournament. I mean, and make some money after that. So certainly that's more enlightening than just a regular season game. I just want to make one more point and then we can move on.
Yeah.
I with the in-season tournament, I think, and I think for a lot of people, they get caught up on this, not only in the NBA, but other sports too. You brought this up, and I think you're right. There's other metrics to measure how well this tournament did, and that is social media, and that is the internet. And I think, as we've seen with different TV deals, it's really unpredictable to see how well this is going to do in attracting the NBA and re-upping their TV deal. So to me, this is another piece of content in which if a streamer, if they can just get their regular standard deal and get a massive increase, and this in-season tournament's a bonus in which it's on Apple TV or Netflix or Amazon, that's a huge success. That's irrelevant what anybody thinks about how the ratings are. If they get, $1 billion deal for this in-season tournament exclusively on Amazon or exclusively on whatever, that is a massive, massive coup for the league, regardless of what people think of like a rating standpoint. So I just want to make people, because really, I think what's going to be determinant of the league's success is going to be the networks and how they value sports properties moving forward. And that's unpredictable. It could go the other way in terms of, hey, they may not see this tournament being too much of value. So, you might be right. But to me, just the count on these ratings being the end all be all, like we're really in an unpredictable time in terms of just, TV programming. And I think we've seen the evidence has proven that sports is a massive asset to that. And the NBA adding another, piece to their resume in terms of selling their product to different TV streamers and as broadcast networks. That's a huge deal, and I think the NBA is going to profit from this hugely, despite people criticizing the ratings of this, the first edition of this tournament.
Yeah, well said. I want to move on as well. And actually, I want to get into some Chicago Bulls news, Justin, because we have some Bulls news for you, stuff that you've been clamoring for a while. I mean, I think since last season, really, maybe even earlier. But we do have some reports now. We're in early trade talk discussions. Yes, believe it or not, it's already time to talk about the trade deadline, which, by the way, is going to be on February 8th, so not far away. Per Sports Illustrated, hopefully not AI Sports Illustrated, but hopefully real Sports Illustrated, Alex Caruso may be off limits in trade talks. And I just want to ask you point blank, I mean, his contract, I think, is a little more than $9 million per year right now. I think he has 2 years left on his deal. I could be wrong about that, but I know that it's under $10 million per year. Do you want to hang on to Alex Caruso? I mean, I guess maybe a more interesting question is what would make you want to break from Alex Caruso?
Have you ever been, can I ask you, it's kind of like related to, it can be any relationship, friendship, dating, job. You ever been in a situation where like, in your heart that like, this is not the right thing for you,
Oh,
but
yeah.
at the same time, like, it's not terrible. Like there's good things will happen, but in your heart, this is not the right situation for you.
Hmm.
And I think with the Bulls, the same thing. Right, the
Hmm.
Bulls were, I think, on a 4-game winning streak. They lose to the Bucks in overtime. But we keep it real. Like the Bulls, if they keep this team currently constructed, I think they're a low play-in team at best if they do nothing. And if we keep going on like this, what's the point of being a play-in team? Like, what is the objective here of this squad? We already know with Lonzo Ball, it is unknown if he's even going to return to basketball. The huge question mark, and it's very clear without him, this team is pretty much borderline mediocre. And so to play this game of keeping Alice Caruso, keeping Zach Levine, keeping DeRozan, what is the overall point of this? Now, I will say if they're waiting to get something more valuable for Alex Caruso, then fine. But to say that he's a centerpiece or just to say he's off limits just because of what he's done for the team, it's like, what's the point of the squad? I like Alex Caruso. I like DeMar DeRozan. And even though I criticize Zach Levine, I don't hate him or think he's a crap player. But this whole roster, as it's currently constructed, it's time to move on. With the Bulls have given it their best shot. It has been a failure, and I think it's time to just adjust and move on. And I wouldn't be saying this if they were within that 6-3 seed within the last 5 years. Then I think there's room to really play with just the roster, get some additions, and then see what happens. But this team has been pretty much a massive disappointment, and they've had a lot of their guys in their lineup. They've lost a lot of games that were close. I've seen them play. They've lost a lot of games in overtime, and they've lost to teams that they should beat. And for a team that should be elite, you have to beat the teams that are weaker than you, and they lose the teams that are inferior on a regular basis. Even though they show up for huge games, like they're motivated against, your Bucks and your Celtics or your Lakers. Like those are teams that they usually play hard against, but a team against the mediocre teams, they usually struggle. And I just think with the Bulls in terms of this whole thing, I said it before. I hate just repeating myself, but what is the point? It's just one of those things. I'd rather just stockpile picks and move on and build towards the future. I think that's the only way this team's going to be successful.
Yeah, Bulls, by the way, do not have their 2023 first round pick. This upcoming draft, I mean, so I guess 2024. And the Bulls also do not, their 2025 pick is going to the Spurs, or it's top 10 protected. So there is a lack of assets there, I guess you could say, for this rebuild. Now, let me ask you this a little bit more specifically with Caruso, because we know with DeMar, with Vooch, with Zach Levine, we know they're also taking up a lot of cap space, and they could bring in some value in terms of picks or other maybe younger pieces, maybe a couple pieces for one of those stars, like some developing projects or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess the argument with Caruso is, since he's such a small cap hit, I mean, unless you are getting, those first round picks that you want, is there anything to keeping him around just for like the culture of the team and developing the youth? Kind of like what, maybe bad comparison, but sort of like what Fred VanVleet is doing for the Rockets right now. Granted, very different contracts there.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I'm not against to keeping him. To me, I think what I don't like is a narrative of just like the Bulls just being this like playoff team or just having any potential. That's my problem. If it's framed like you were saying, I'm down for that. If they were to say, "Hey, he's there to provide this veteran leadership for some of our younger core guys," cool. Then I'm on board with that. But it seems to me like the front office is delusional and thinking this team's going to be, one day just a contender. It's clearly the evidence that's not shown that.
Now, I would say the leader for the Bulls and your favorite player, I think, if I'm correct, on the current roster, DeMar DeRozan, it's rumored here, I'll just read it. This from Chris Haynes. It's pretty likely that the Bulls may look to move DeMar DeRozan at the trade deadline if they're unable to reach an agreement on a contract extension. And we have further information that DeMar DeRozan has requested that his top two destinations would be the New York Knicks or the Miami Heat. Just as a Bulls fan, as a DeMar fan in general, where do you like him to go if you're favoring one or the other between the Knicks and the Heat?
I think either destination would probably be the best. I think the Knicks would be perfect. I just think right now the Knicks, it's one of those things. I mean, No Dunks brought it up to where they, beat a lot of mediocre teams, but can't beat the elite teams. And you clearly know where they're going to stand. They're like that 4th, 5th seed. And I think DeMar DeRozan is a game changer. Like he is clutch and he's efficient. And I
Yeah.
think either destination, I don't really have a preference for either one. I think the Homer Bulls fan would probably be like neither, just because
Right.
I probably don't like them. But like I like DeMar, and to me, I can think objectively. I think either one. I think it'd be cool to see him on either team, especially with Jimmy Butler. What a great combination that would be. And I
Mm.
think instantly would make him a huge threat, in the East, despite like some of the power teams that are in there with Boston and Milwaukee. So um, I think either one. I understand why he wants to go there. I mean, instantly they become a huge contender, no matter kind of as long as they maintain the fort with the Heat in the next within that 4 to 5 seeding. I mean, with him added on those squads home
Yeah.
court, I don't think it's going to matter too much. So I get why he wants to go there. So
Yeah, and I tend to have a heavy bias here for him going to the Knicks if he's going to one of those two teams. Just seems
sure,
like there's a lot of overlap in skills if you've got, granted, we don't know, who the Heat are going to move in a deal like that, but
good point. Yeah,
if they're taking on like Kyle Lowry and maybe there's a third team involved and there's some picks or something like that, or if they're moving Hero, if they're not moving Hero, then I don't know. Between Hero and Butler, there's a lot of overlapping skills there. Granted, DeMar can play off the ball maybe a little bit more than those two players, but I just think he fits exactly what the Knicks need, and the Knicks could maybe do some sort of 3-team trade and unload Randall at the same time.
yeah.
Seems to make the most sense to me, but we've got a little ways to go. We'll see how this develops, and of course, keep you all as well as Justin in the know on this stuff. The other Bulls player that is going to be a big trade target, he's out right now, I believe, with a foot injury for about 3 to 4 more weeks. But Zach LaVine, who was kind of seen, as the golden child of the future of this team for a little while when he was brought in from Minnesota anyway. Uh, he is rumored as a target for both the 76ers and the Los Angeles Lakers. And I guess my question would be, do you think either of those teams are really realistically interested in Zach LaVine?
I think for the Sixers, that's a horrible mistake. I mean, we're
Yeah.
just talking about Tyrese Maxey and just him, emerging as an all star. And
Yeah.
now you're going to put,
Bingo.
another, perennial all star and a guy who wants the ball and taking shots away from Maxey. I mean, that's a that's a horrible idea. In LA, I think it's a little better just because you don't know the status of Anthony Davis. And there's no more neutral core games. So it's like, normally he's very dominant in those. Now there's no more, in season tournaments for him to really flourish. So, the likelihood of Anthony Davis, getting hurt is high. And so having a Zach Levine to kind of fill that void could be an asset for the Lakers. The problem is does he have the ego to be humbled in terms of just, hey, I'm going to let Austin Reeves take it. Like Austin Reeves has been phenomenal. How's that going to affect Austin Reeves? I mean, he's really emerged as a huge option for this team. And I have Zach Levine, who is ball dominant. I just don't know. And it's one thing where he has to play with DeMar. Another thing where you're dealing with Austin Reeves, LeBron, Anthony Davis. I mean, that is I don't know how that's going to work. So I'm questioning why they're interested in him, to be honest. I don't think that's a great match.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I don't see the interest either team realistically has, and I don't see why that would be a good fit. I mean, I don't think anything we've seen from Zach LaVine, like we know he's not going to make them better defensively. So what are we doing here? I guess with the Sixers, you could argue they have at least like a bunch of assets on that trade left over from the Clippers where maybe they could get him for not giving up much value in terms of what they currently have on their roster, but I'm puzzled as well. So we'll see what develops there. A couple other trade updates per Shams Charania. We have Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and PJ Tucker, who also seem to be likely trade assets. Uh, and again, that's coming per Sham Charania of The Athletic. So another couple players to keep an eye on moving forward. We know that OG Anunoby was like the coveted trade asset, just talking about giving ridiculous amounts of assets just to acquire him. The sexy 3-and-D free agent, I guess, OG Anunoby. So he's back, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. The Raptors, for the record, have said, as they did last season, that Scotty Barnes is off the table at the moment. So be curious to see what they do. The Raptors sitting at 9-13 right now does feel kind of like they may be moving in the direction of a rebuild as well. Some other headlines before we head out for this week. NBA fans, rejoice or maybe live in fear, depending on if you're playing this team or not, or how much you believe in them. But Ja Morant is coming back in 7 days. ESPN, reading from the headline here, ESPN has given the Grizzlies a 0.4% chance to make the playoffs at this point. Now, based on the context of this post, I don't really know if that means like a top 6 seed, like you're guaranteed in the playoffs, or if that just means the the play-in tournament.
Yeah, I think it's both.
So that is a very, very low chance, and honestly surprises me a little bit. I think to get to the 10 seed, I do think that there is a realistic shot. Talked about it a little bit last week. Justin, wanted to get your quick thoughts on this. Just the Grizzlies sitting, I believe, at the moment at 6-16 in the Western Conference. What are their chances here? I mean, can you see them making a push to the play-in tournament?
I concur with you. Not much to add. I mean, you take a look at the standings. You have Utah and you have the Warriors, which they've been very inconsistent, and the Pelicans. They're one Zion injury away from being toast. So, to me, if you take a look at it, I mean, I think with Ja Morant, I think they could easily leapfrog Utah, and then you have the Warriors and the Pelicans to worry about. So, to me, I'm not. I agree with you. I think they have a pretty decent shot. Just depending on Ja Morant's conditioning, how much it kind of depends on his mind state too. I mean, a lot of things have happened to him over the past like 8 months. So,
Yeah. And
mentally,
by the
how is
way, Shams was reporting that Ja Morant looks good in practices. So
well
bear
practice
that in mind. He looks
practice is
basketball ready.
practice is one thing, on the
Right.
court is another. So we'll see
That's
when he
true.
plays. So, I think all that says is he's conditioned. I mean, at least he's showed up, at least ready for practice. But in game shape, that's another issue. We're traveling and all that. That's another matter at hand. But I agree with you. I think the chances of them making the playoffs, I think it's more than what that stat says, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, 0.4% with so much time. We're talking 60 games left in the regular season for the Grizzlies specifically. I mean, we saw what the Lakers did last season where they looked terrible. The whole awkward like Russell
Sure.
Westbrook phase of that
Yeah.
team, and they totally turned it around. Now, granted, I know the Grizzlies don't have LeBron, but you could argue Ja Morant is a more valuable asset than LeBron at this point in his career, in terms of elevating that team. So be curious to see. I mean, Steven Adams is still going to be out no matter what, which is a downer and a hit for that team. No denying that. But yeah, I'm with you. So we're on the same page here. Grizzlies still have a shot. Don't write them off just yet. I think the big thing to look out for is if they go on a losing streak after Ja Morant debuts or gets a win or two, then that's the point in time where you wonder if there is some like front office tanking that
Sure.
takes place, where it's like, okay, let's low key shut it down and get a better draft pick to put another asset around Ja Morant. But I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they're able to claw their way back in and maybe get some redemption from last year's playoffs.
Yeah.
So next, I want to pull up details here regarding a sale of an NBA franchise that seems to be kind of low key flying under the radar here. And that is the sale of the Dallas Mavericks to the Adelson family. This is per Mark Stein. Um, the Adelson family is in the process of buying a significant stake in the Dallas Mavericks. The Stein line has learned. League sources say Mark Cuban would continue to retain operational control of the team. That's why I don't think this has gotten many headlines, is because he'll still be involved. Originally, this team was valued at about 3.5 billion in worth, and that's been increased to 3.8 billion in worth, roughly. So, any thoughts about the selling of this team? There are some rumors about, I guess, Mark Cuban is getting into the casino business. Potentially, that may have been part of the stipulation because gambling remains illegal in Texas. There's also rumors, Mark Cuban hasn't been shy about tweeting about politics in the past. So some people buzzing about maybe he's going to be a politician, a senator, or something like that. What are your thoughts, your takeaway from the news of this team being sold, which, by the way, is rumored to unanimously pass next week? I think towards the end of next week, they're voting on this, like December 20th.
So, a couple of things. I think it leans more into his desire to make Dallas a kind of second Vegas. I think he's talked about that. I think he wants to build
Mm,
a new arena and
mm.
kind of incorporate more gambling. It's interesting because I'm very curious why Texas doesn't want to legalize gambling in that state. I find that very fascinating. Just how much sports is very important. I'm wondering what is the holdup there. I'd be interested to talk to somebody about
Well, lots of states, lots of states. I think a lot of the southern states, it's still illegal to gamble.
that.
Yeah, so there's kind of some legislative hoops. Maybe he's going to become a politician, make gambling legal in Texas, and
There
then
you go.
back off and get
There you
this
go.
report
Now
going.
that's interesting. So I'm very curious to see what happens there, and I'm very curious to see how the players really accept this with the Addison family, because of I think Miriam Addison. Like I hate to get political, but I think the league, just based on what's happened with Donald Sterling, she's a huge Trump supporter. So if that gets out, just wondering if she becomes it's very interesting with if Mark Cuban is the face of the franchise, if he is running the team, if she's a silent investor, I don't see that being too much of a factor or whatever. But it's one of those things. If she's very vocal about this team, I could see this being an issue with a lot of the other players. We've seen this with the WNBA, with just I
Mm.
think with the Atlanta Dream. So I could see this being a problem, just depending on how much she's involved with this team. I'm not trying to make it political. Just based on evidence, we've seen, especially with
Mhm.
the NBA specifically, their players hold a lot of weight. And if they're not down for this, I can see this being kind of a headache for the NBA down the road. I mean, we already talked about them, wanting to get a new TV contract. If this becomes kind of a big stink, I can see this being kind of a negative headlines for the league. But it kind of just depends. I don't see it happening. I see them being a silent kind of investor in all of this. Like you said, like I think Mark Cuban's going to be running basketball operations. I think things will be proceed as normal. I think it's one of those things where they're going to back Mark Cuban's vision of this, gambling empire, in Dallas. I think that's where we're going. I don't see him running for office just based on him wanting to be there for his kids. So
Mhm.
overall, I don't see it being a big thing, but potentially, depending on where this goes, I kind of see some problems with this. So we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you bring up that dynamic. I think what is interesting about that, and to me, what I'd be looking for if tempers do flare around those things. WNBA players, all due respect, you can feel however you want to feel about them voicing their opinions. There's a little bit, based on them being paid less than NBA players, there's a little bit less to lose there, it feels like. Whereas, I mean, if someone like Kyrie Irving or Luca, who are making $30+ million on their contract, are they willing to, sit out, do those things? Players do have a ton of power.
Well,
So
it's not
it's
necessarily
not out of
Luca.
the realm of
Yeah,
possibility for that
well,
to happen.
for sure, but it's not just Luca and Kyrie. It's the rest of
Sure,
the league too. I mean,
sure.
with Donald Sterling, all the players were ready to reportedly bounce if that wasn't changed. So it's a league thing as well. I think the league, the players, I perceive it to be they're probably more tight in terms of their emergency surrounding what's going on. So I think that's just something to watch out for, even if Luca and Kyrie are remaining silent on this issue. And Kyrie, he's a very much. I mean, who knows? I mean, he's an unpredictable wild card. So I don't. I mean, to me, if he's not down with this, I think he would say something. I mean, look what those.
Yeah, he could be one of the ones to bring
Yeah,
it to the forefront.
yeah. Who knows? So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think on the owner's side, it doesn't seem like they foresee that being an issue, certainly, because there's from what I've read, in prepping for today, there's near unanimous support or unanimous support. We haven't heard any dissension among the ranks of the owners,
Sure.
but we're talking about a population that is walled off quite a bit from other perceptions and things like that. So no, I think you bring up a good point, and it is going to be interesting to see. So if we do see that down the road, you guys remember what Justin said, and Justin called it. Not that we want to see that type of turmoil come up or whatever, but we'll see what happens. Justin, any other points, things you've seen around the league? Anything else you want to bring up before we wrap up for today?
No, that's it.
We have some excellent Christmas games coming. Don't you guys worry. We're going to be talking about those games next week. We'll do a little preview of that. And there's plenty more NBA news, even beyond the topics that we were able to cover today. So we will be back in the lab next week. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Just a reminder, you can get in touch with the show, hoopsologypod@gmail.com. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube. Of course, follow us anywhere you're doing social media. For Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. Peace out.
See you next time.